Hey, on my Travel Wins podcast, I'm looking at Mike Robbins. How are you today, Mike?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Mike is a motivational speaker and author and a coach. So really kind of a cool idea to talk to you while you're not traveling, which is mainly what you do. We had a little pre-talk, and I think it's interesting to see how you're changing and molding your business around what's going on in the world. So how much has the quarantining affected your business, and what are you doing about it?
Well, quite a bit. I mean, for this is year 20 for me as a speaker, out in the world. And I basically, on average, I do about 80 to 100 speaking engagements a year. And usually about half of them, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Usually about half of them every year are here locally because we work with a lot of tech companies in Silicon Valley. But at least, half, if not more, I'm getting on planes to fly to Vegas or New York or Dallas or over to London or where, that's just kind of what I do. And we've had somewhere around 25 events either postponed or canceled. And, my new book, We're All in This Together, just came out. So we had a whole book tour and, book events and things that were scheduled that we had to adjust. And basically it's shifted now where, a lot of our clients are asking if I can come on and do a keynote on Zoom or on Skype or on WebEx, and that's the way everybody's gathering. So we've been trying to pivot and adjust that way. So it's been, and I've done some of those over the years, even when we weren't in a quarantining pandemic mode, but it was much more the exception than the rule. I'd maybe do 2 or 3 like that every year. Whereas now for the foreseeable future, I'll be sitting here in my office where I'm talking to you, and I'll be staring at my computer and waving to people out there in the cyber world,
Well, it's interesting, because obviously you could do, to a certain extent, you could do your motivational speech virtually. And, if you, I mean, your guests, your clients are like Google, Wells Fargo, eBay, Gap.
Yep.
Big companies. So they could set up, some big TVs and you could do that. But I'm curious to see how, not nervous, but let's go with nervous, and you can change it afterwards. How nervous are you about not having that feedback or instant interaction as you're going through your speech?
It's different. It's funny. I was watching Stephen Colbert was interviewing Trevor Noah, both of whom were very successful, very funny comedians who host late night shows. And they were asking each other or talking to each other about their own process. Now, listen, I'm not a comedian. I'm not Stephen Colbert. I'm not Trevor Noah. But what they were talking about is the feedback they get from the audience because they do their show in front of a live audience. And theirs is scripted and it's a monologue every night and they're doing comedy bits. I mean, my stuff isn't scripted like that. I tell some of the same stories. I give some of the same speeches or talk about some of the same topics. But a lot of the way that I work and always have, whether I'm talking to a group of 20 or 30 or 40 people at a small event or, hundreds or thousands at a big conference or convention, I very much feed off of the interaction with the audience and, laughing at a joke or engaging with a story or, and so it is a little different. I mean, I host my own podcast and have conversations both where I'm interviewing people like you're interviewing me right now, but sometimes I just get on and record solo. Right. So I can definitely do it, but the lack of the audience interaction is difficult. And I'm an extrovert and I really feed off the energy of being around people. So I've been finding that challenging. And, I know your show is focused all on people who travel for work. And while it can be at times tiring and challenging, I actually really enjoy traveling. I mean, I miss my family when I'm gone. Yeah. And I sometimes get exhausted like a normal human being. But when I'm out in the world traveling and doing my work, I really feel energized and excited because I love what I do. And it feels like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I feel very blessed and grateful to have such wonderful clients that fly me to different events and pay me to speak to their people. It just feels like a real, privilege to get to do that.
Yeah. See, I feel the same way. Like right now, I haven't been on the road. This is the longest I haven't been on the road in over a decade. Yeah. And just, mentally, I've always told myself, even before this, was if I'm not on the road, I'm not making money. And that's not necessarily true, but I mean, that's just kind of the mindset I've always had. And I like going on the road,
Yeah.
Especially now both my daughters are out of college and living on their own. So it makes it a little bit easier, but
yeah,
I still like seeing different parts of the country, and for me, I drive a lot. And so I'll take different roads. I'll look on the map and just go, I'm going to take that one because I haven't been on that one ever.
Yeah. Right.
and just plan in. But so I'm the same way. It's like that's going to be the interesting part, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I feel like our girls are 14 and 11, and I've been traveling for almost 20 years myself. So prior to having kids, it was one thing. Once we got married and Michelle got pregnant, it was another thing. And then having a baby at home, and then having a baby and a toddler, and all the different stages. So there are challenges to being away. It seems as though it's harder for Michelle and for our girls with me traveling than it is on me, because I personally really enjoy it. I do find aspects of it challenging, and I try really hard to manage my schedule so that I don't miss things. But now having that off the table, there is something about it that is totally disorienting that I don't like. But I have to say, and again, I know this is not something that people are talking about all that openly right now, understandably, but there are parts of this that I'm actually really enjoying. And I say that with respect and awareness of the fact that people are getting sick and people are dying and people are losing their jobs. And there's a lot of real significant impact to all of it. I mean, our business is significantly impacted. So I'm not saying like I'm happy about it, but
right.
The situation is what it is. And I'm enjoying the family dinners. I'm enjoying the, being in the backyard with my girls and sitting on the couch and watching TV together at night. And some of the things that just based on the nature of my schedule and my travel, and just their lives and their activities, like wasn't happening and wouldn't be happening, obviously, if we weren't in this situation.
Well, I've been joking with my friends that I think my wife's nickname is Wuhan because all of a sudden, all of her to-do list is getting done finally. Because I used to say, hey, I'm going on the road. I can't, I can't paint the house right now. I can't caulk the bathtub right now.
Right.
And she's like, hey, remember all that stuff you were fix my bike and this and that? I'm like, yeah. I got nothing. I got to do it now. So
right. Well, it is interesting, though. I mean, one of the things that I've learned about myself over the years, there are certain things that I can do when I'm on an airplane, work-wise, or when I travel, when I'm sitting in a hotel room. Not that I can't do when I'm home or when I'm in my office, but that I don't tend to do as much of. And same is true with, like, there are a bunch of projects around the house, I think, for all of us, if those of us that do travel on a regular basis. And it is interesting, like, thinking, if I had a stretch at home or I was home for a couple months, I would definitely handle that closet or that project or that thing. And I don't know about you, but, like, some of those things still aren't getting handled. And I'm like, maybe it wasn't that I've been traveling too much. Maybe it's just I really don't want to do those things.
I have a garage that's calling my name.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and one of the things too that, I mean, I really love to speak, which is what I do primarily.
Yeah.
And I've written 5 books. I don't love to write. And so writing to me, the book writing is always kind of a challenge and a chore. Although I like it when it's done. And then even just writing articles and blog posts or creating content, like the easiest content for me to create is podcasts, whether I'm interviewing someone or it's just a podcast on my own, because it's talking, which is much easier, but like shooting a video or writing a piece, much harder for me. And in the last, 7-8 weeks with all of this, I've actually created a ton of content, which is kind of crazy because I have this book coming out and we're trying to pivot the business, but I just felt compelled. Like I had things I wanted to say and I wanted to say them right now. So I just started writing, and I had things I wanted to podcast about, and I had things I wanted to shoot videos about. And my team has actually been kind of laughing because they're often on me about, Mike, could you do this? Could you create this? We really need some. And I'm like, yeah, leave me alone. Get off my back. Like, I'm busy. I got to go get on a plane. I got to go get ready for a speech. And all of a sudden it's like, I just, they were like, oh my God, could you slow down with all the content? Like, we don't even know what to do with all of it. But I say that because I think, though, that what's important for us and those of us who do travel, I mean, to be able to just understand the rhythms of our work and the kind of biorhythms of traveling. And that's one thing I have been finding both liberating and also challenging about this time not being on the road, because it's definitely disorienting and it has completely thrown my own schedule, like most people's, upside down in a way that I wasn't quite prepared for. And I've also found that there's been some opportunities in it that I wasn't expecting.
Well, I think it's kind of for the young people. I still remember 2008 like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And,
for sure.
And it was a nightmare for my world. I mean, it was
me too.
Horrifically bad. And the last 10 years have been great for me, professionally, financially. It's been fantastic. But I still remember 2008, like, oh. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how many of the young people, and I think that's the millennial thing, where it's not that they're arrogant or whatever. It's just they haven't been through it yet.
It's true. It's true. I mean, think about this. I don't know how old your daughters are, but if you think of someone who's anywhere in their 20s right now,
24 and 26.
Okay, so your daughters are right in that window. So if you're
and
30,
all their friends.
If you're 30 or under, right? I mean, you graduated from school, let's say 2010, 2011. The economy was still kind of tight. Things were starting to open back up. But if you graduated from college within the last 8 or 9 years, you came out into a pretty good job market for the most part.
Yep.
And it's just gotten better and better and better in terms of opportunities. And so that's grown and expanded. For anybody who's in their 30s, at least, if not older, I'm 46, having gone through both what happened in '08, but those of us who worked anywhere close to the technology world and went through the dot-com bust, anybody who's much older than that and went through the slowing of the economy in the early 90s as well as the late 80s, going through a couple of economic downturns will teach you some things about the cycles of how things go. And it's funny because I was saying at the beginning of this year to my wife, one of the things I was feeling nervous about was like, babe, the economy's been really good for a long time. Like, I'm grateful. I know, like, we weren't in a position 10, 15 years ago that we had any money saved or invested, but I'm a little nervous about the stock market's so high and all this. And it's just like, I can't imagine this continuing for 5, 10 more years. I mean, there's got to be a point in which it levels off or it goes down.
Right.
I don't think any of us saw, what's going to happen? A global pandemic that's going to shut the economy down. But I think in a sense, without walking around paranoid or like walking on eggshells all the time, I do think an awareness that things go up and they go down is a really healthy thing. And so for a lot of millennials, for anyone in their 20s right now, leaning on the people who are a little older and a little wiser and have been through, something. Now, none of us have been through anything quite like this completely, and we don't know what the ultimate economic fallout of this is going to be. But I think the longer this thing goes, the more there's the reality of we're definitely going to be in a recession. The question is how deep, how significant, how long, and then what's it going to look like, and where's it going to be impacting the economy? Does it impact everything across the board? Because we've never really gone into a recession where the fundamentals of the economy were so strong going in, and all of a sudden it just turned on a dime the way that it did like this.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you're saying, because to a certain extent, and don't take this the wrong way, people, but it was somewhat of a man-made crisis in the sense of,
right.
The governors, they didn't have to shut the country down. Did they save more lives because of it? Yes.
Yes.
But they weren't legally bound. There wasn't a war. It wasn't anything like that created this.
And it was right. And it wasn't similar to, like, you think back to '08, it was like the fundamental underpinnings of the credit markets and what was holding the economy had really ballooned it up as big as it was. The bubble burst, just like, a number of years earlier, 8 years earlier, when the dot-com bubble burst, it was like, oh yeah, it was built sort of on quicksand and it went away.
Yeah.
Whereas that wasn't the case here. And so you're right. It was an intervening of governments to say, we need to do what's in the public interest to save lives. So we're going to shut all these things down.
Correct.
But now what you've got, though, is, again, if they opened up the country and the world tomorrow and said, everything's back open for business, we're just going to deal with whoever gets sick and whoever dies, there's going to be a bunch of people, myself included, who would not go back outside completely yet and be like, wait a second, I don't feel safe and comfortable doing that based on what I know and what we've been through. So now we're going to also deal with, and think about, I don't know about you, but I know for us, I mean, obviously our lives have changed significantly, but just the things that we're willing to spend money on have dramatically changed in the last 2 months, because it's like, hey, we got to see how this thing's all going to play out and what's going to happen and how we're, so I mean, those things now, the consumer confidence or lack thereof engaging in the economy has changed significantly through this experience. So that's going to have a lasting impact until people feel safer to not only go around, but I think about traveling, right? It's like, as much as I want to get back to normal, I want to get back on airplanes, I want to get back out in the world speaking at events, but when are those going to happen and how are they going to be? And are we all going to have to be wearing masks and gloves and in this sort of alternate state of how we interact and engage with each other, not shaking hands, not hugging, not, you know what I mean? Like, again, it's as simple and superficial as those things seem. I mean, we sit home and sit on the couch and watch TV shows that weren't even that long ago. And it's like, you know, movies and things, and people are hugging and people are gathering all together in groups. And it almost makes me cringe a little bit because I'm like, oh gosh, remember when we could do that? Like, when are we going to feel comfortable doing that again?
One thing I totally agree, because and the reason I don't think we know exactly how bad it's going to be, I'll give you an example. And I literally roller skating with my wife yesterday on some of our local streets here because we can't go on the beach. And and I was talking to my neighbor who's a vet, and he's working on a screenplay. So we was talking about movies, and the entertainment industry is just shut down. And my other neighbor is a medic on sets, and he's done. I mean, they're not even talking to him about when they're coming back and all that. But, you know, you look at a movie like Top Gun 2's coming out, or it's supposed to come out this summer.
Right. Yeah, big.
What'd that cost? $100 million to make? $80 million? I mean, I don't know. But a lot of money.
You got to be. I mean, Tom Cruise alone probably is half that.
Well, he's probably taking more back-end stuff. But let's say it's $100 million. Well, if they don't open up the movie theaters for mass gatherings, does he release the movie? Does he shut it down? I mean, is it a Netflix movie now? I mean,
right. Well, and then what are the economics of that? I mean, I don't know enough about how movies work and make money, but obviously the release in the theaters, and then when it goes to video or streaming or however that works. I mean, it is fascinating to think about certain things, that the desire for content, you know, right now, as a former athlete and a huge sports fan, not having any sports is driving me insane.
Yeah.
And I do realize it's entertainment, it's superficial. It's like, but gosh, the rhythms of the year, the no March Madness, the spring training not ending, the opening day of baseball not happening, the NBA playoffs not happening, all of these things that as a sports fan who loves sports, really missing. And at the same time, the desire for sports content, and like ESPN moving up the release of the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan documentary that people were just eating up. And it's literally then fodder for sports talk shows for the next 3 or 4 days because
that's all they have
else to talk about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm fascinated by, again, just the economics of that. Does that end up having that documentary, which they had to spend tens of millions of dollars on to put together, and was 22 years in the making because they had that footage from back in '98 with Jordan and the Bulls, and they put it out. Like, does that ultimately then have it, you know, obviously more people probably watched that documentary than would have, and it would have been very compelling and interesting anyway. They were planning on releasing it after the NBA Finals in June. But again, like, does then it make sense economically for a movie like Top Gun or whatever, just say, hey, we're just going to put it out on streaming right away, and would we all sit home and watch it, and would that have it be as
and just take $100 million hit?
Well, but I don't know. I mean, again, like, that's why I don't know how the, you know, how it works on the back end of how they make money on those things. But it is interesting to think about. I mean, I think about this, obviously I'm not producing blockbuster films by any stretch of the imagination, but as the world of, you know, the world of book publishing and other just content delivery changes so much, and the economics of those things change, you know, I've always thought, as I've talked to people about this over the years, you know, and releasing a book this year versus 13 years ago when my first book came out, it's changed quite a bit in terms of how many people buy books and in what format and how do they engage. And there's so many more books out there and all of those things. But people say, well, aren't you worried that these things are going to go away, or people aren't doing that anymore? Or, you know, what happens? It's like, but content's never going to go away, and the desire for quality content's never going to go away. It's just going to be the format in which we do it. And even now, like, thinking about my business and about travel, I do wonder, as all of this comes back and we fast forward a couple years, and let's say things are back to normal and the economy's recovered, and right, I wonder, though, how it's going to change the way companies, like some of the clients that I work with, meet and gather. Are they still going to have big sales conferences in Las Vegas? Because I still think you need to bring people together. There's so many reasons why that's valuable and important. But are some of those things going to move to virtual? Are some people going to not go back to work in the office and just work from home because we realize, hey, we can do that just as effectively and we don't miss that much? Or I don't know. I mean, the future of work has been changing dramatically anyway. I think this is going to speed things up and change things in more ways than we're even aware of at the moment.
Okay, I got a couple questions for you.
Yep.
Most importantly is, How did you become a Giants fan if you grew up in Oakland?
Well, I'm not a Giants fan. I mean, I am now because they became a client, and I moved. So here's my story. So I grew up in Oakland, huge A's fan, huge Raiders fan, huge Warriors fan growing up. Stayed an A's fan my entire life. Still a huge A's fan. Love the Oakland A's. Probably my favorite team of any team. I've been to 500-600 Oakland A's games in my life. Absolutely love them to my core. The Raiders left and moved to LA in 1981 or whenever they left, and we all hated them and were really mad at them for leaving. So I became a 49ers fan. With the Giants, I grew up absolutely hating the San Francisco Giants, because that's what you do in a place where there's two teams and you're a kid, right? And then over the course of my life, my dad used to take us to some Giants games, and I appreciated going to Candlestick Park and seeing Willie McCovey and then Jack Clark and then Will Clark, and so I was aware of the Giants. I just didn't like them. By the time I was an adult and then moved to San Francisco, I played baseball in college at Stanford, and then I played professionally in the Kansas City Royals organization because I got drafted by the Royals out of Stanford. Ended up injuring my pitching arm in the minor leagues. Moved home, got done playing in 98. They opened up what was then called Pac Bell Park, which is now called Oracle Park. It's changed name like 4 times in San Francisco. Beautiful, probably the most beautiful ballpark in all of Major League Baseball, in my opinion. And one of my jobs I had when I worked for this internet company was like 2 blocks from the ballpark, and we had tickets that we could take clients to. So I started going to the ballpark, and then Bonds broke the home run record the next year. And I started to go, look, I'm not a Giants fan, but I do like going to Giants games, and I root for them. And they were in the World Series in 2002 against the Angels, and I was definitely rooting for them because I was living in San Francisco. And then in 2010, I get a phone call from the Giants, and they say, "Hey, Mike, would you come and give a talk to the whole organization? We've heard about you and your work, and we really like your work around appreciation." And I said, "Oh, are you kidding? I would love to." And early that season, this is spring of 2010, I go give a talk to the whole Giants organization. Resonates well. They really like it. They bring me back in a couple more times throughout the season, and they end up having this magical sort of very serendipitous run through the postseason, and they win the World Series in 2010, which surprised everybody, including them, because they didn't really have the talent on paper that would have warranted it. And it was a huge deal here in the Bay Area. I did not anticipate what a big deal it would be, because the A's had won 4 titles, but it wasn't that big of a deal. But the Giants winning was a huge deal because they had never won since they moved from New York in 1958. And then I've proceeded to work with the San Francisco Giants organization over the last 10 years, and just really got into that young team that they had that then won 2 more titles in the next, 4 successive. They won 3 titles in 5 years. And it just was a lot of fun to root for them and follow them because they did it, they had a fun, great chemistry and group of guys, and different even than the group that was earlier with Barry Bonds and had a ton of talent. That team really endeared itself to the fans, and so all my Oakland friends give me all kinds of grief about
that's the only reason I was doing
a Giants fan.
Yeah, I lived in Alameda.
The thing is, at the end,
go ahead.
You lived in Alameda.
Yeah, my ex-wife went to Berkeley, and so we lived in Alameda. So I became a.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Well, and my allegiance to teams has altered a little bit over the years because I do have a few friends. I was a Houston Astros fan for 5 years because my friend AJ Hinch was the manager. He since got fired and left in a very difficult and sad way a few months ago, but rooted for them passionately for 5 years because he was my teammate and my catcher and my classmate at Stanford. And then my other good friend, Brody Van Wagenen, is the general manager of the New York Mets. So I am now a very strong New York Mets fan. And that's more just because these are guys that are like brothers of mine who I love dearly, and I want them to do well. And knowing enough guys in the game, having played and been around it, I became more interested in players and people that I know connected with different organizations over the years. But it's always fun to root for local teams. And I've been a Golden State Warriors fan since I was a kid, love them forever. And it's been really fun to have them get good. And
finally, they were terrible for a long time.
Oh, forever. And that's the part that made that so sweet.
Yeah.
And Steph Curry is probably my favorite athlete of all time. I literally have a picture of him on my wall in my office, which I can't remember the last time I put a photo of an athlete on my wall, but I just love that guy. I love watching him play, and I love the way he operates.
Don't worry. I won't tell Michelle. You're cheating on her with Steph Curry.
She knows. She knows I have a non-sexual crush on Steph Curry.
It happens. I'm the same way.
I have.
Go ahead, bud.
Oh, I was just gonna say, there's usually a list of men that I have sort of, there's like my top guys that I have sort of man crushes on, and Steph Curry's on that list, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, who created Hamilton's, on that list, and a few others. But my wife always makes fun of me about those things.
As she should.
Yes.
I was interested to see, you've been speaking for so long, and now this came up literally out of nowhere. With the virus and all that. How it's got to completely change the potential of 2021 is not going to look anything like you thought it would. No matter what happens. We're going to come back, but I don't think we'll come back to that extent. I don't think it's, you know what I mean? So how does a speaker speak if they're not doing speaking events?
Well, it's a good question. I think 9/11 and the recession in 2008 were in some ways precursors to this. They're very different.
Yeah.
But I think the world changed on 9/11. Travel changed. Events changed. The way we operated changed. Things changed during the recession and after the recession. I don't know. I don't know what the rest of this year looks like. I don't know what next year looks like. I have no idea. A friend of mine a while back said when this thing first started, hey, if anyone tells you they know how this is going to play out, they're either lying or they're crazy. And I agree with that. And I think, my intention with my own work, without oversimplifying it or without being Pollyanna about it, is like my job has always been just to show up every day and try to do the next right thing and try to be smart about how I operate my business and try to show up and be of service and be of value to the people that I serve. And if that looks like me sitting in my office and staring at my computer or my phone and speaking to people virtually or creating content that we can put out into the world, like that's what it looks like right now. It's not my ideal situation, but it's kind of like back when I was playing baseball. Like I was a pitcher, but earlier in my life, sometimes I played first base, sometimes I played center field, sometimes I just wanted to play. So wherever you need me to play, coach, I'm ready to play. And sometimes I had to sit on the bench, and I didn't like that, but I wanted to play. And so I kind of take that mindset and that mentality to my business. Am I concerned about it? Sure. I have team members and people counting on me and us, and things might need to change. I've got a family to feed like everybody else does. And, I don't know, but I trust in my own resilience. One of the things I've been saying, Pete, to a lot of people recently is like, look, when we're in the face of something really difficult and scary that we don't know how we're going to get through, which collectively we are right now.
Yeah.
One of the things we can do is look back at times in our lives when we were faced with situations that we didn't know how we were going to get through. And somehow we figured a way, right? We all have.
Absolutely.
Like we're all 100% effective at getting through every challenge we've ever faced so far in our lives if we're still here. So it's like remembering, you know what? I think I and we collectively have more than this moment requires, even though it might end up being really hard and really scary and really bumpy along the way. I trust in the resilience of humanity, and I trust in my own resilience. So, but again, talk to me in 3 months or 6 months or a year, and we'll see where I'm at and where we all are. But I just think, again, human beings are incredibly strong and resilient and always have been. And it's hard when you're in the middle of something. It's like, think about, I remember years ago going through a really difficult time in my life when I was talking to a therapist, and she said to me, Mike, don't waste a good crisis. And I said, what? And she's like,
Nice.
Look, you're going through a really tough time. It's super painful right now. She goes, look, but here's what I know. You will get through this. The question is, who are you going to be on the other side of it? Are you going to learn from this? Are you going to grow from this? Are you going to become deeper, more aware, more compassionate, more resilient? Or are you just going to figure out how to suck it up and push your way through it? And really, when we're in the midst of a crisis, sometimes as painful as it is, it's fertile ground, fertile soil, so to speak, for us to grow, for us to change, for us to develop. And a lot gets created. There's all those stories of all the amazing things that got created during the Great Depression or got created during World War II or whatever. And I just think, again, I don't mean to minimize the pain that any of us are feeling or the fear, because it's real. But at the same time, I also want to try to be as open-minded and aware as I possibly can in the midst of this. And, my life and my business may look really different in a year or two, and not necessarily in ways that I want it to. But, so far I'm I've been hanging in there all these years. I think I'll continue to, and that's my plan.
Well, your business might have changed anyways. That's the whole thing. It's like my career and money and everything else got so much better after 2008.
Totally.
So
totally.
I'm thankful now that happened.
Right. And think about that. I mean, that's one thing that I try to hold on to when I start to panic a little bit about this. I mean, even looking at the stock market right now. I mean, remember, the stock market got down, if I remember, the Dow Jones got down into like 8,000 or something crazy low back in 2008, 2009. And it's like, here we are, even in the midst of this pandemic and all this crazy stuff going on. And like, the market's been up and down and it's been volatile, but it's still
back in the
23 or 24,000 or whatever it is. I mean, it's to the point where it's like, if you had told someone 10 years ago, the market's going to get up to 29,000, almost 30,000 in early 2020, and then it's going to tank and go down to 23 or 22,000, you'd be like, oh, well, you're smoking crack. And what are you talking about?
And I'll take the 23. I'll take the 23 over the 8.
Totally. Or just even thinking about whether it's not even you have money invested in the market. It's just think about
just like the economy.
If, home values and the way the housing market just completely imploded to the point where it's like, we were in a really bad space. We had to do a short sale on the house that we were in. We bought a house at the top of the market that we couldn't really afford. I mean, we had so many people had the same story. And I think of the house that we're in now and the place that we were able to get to through that process, as painful as all that was, it was impossible to know at the time that was going to unfold that way. And we don't know how this thing is going to unfold, but trusting that things will recover and rebound in ways that we can't even prepare for. If we use the last 12 years as an example, even to that conversation you and I were having earlier about people who've graduated from college in the last 8 or 9 years don't know any different. Yeah. One of the things that those of us who've lived through something like this before can teach them is like, hey, you know what? This sucks and it's hard and it's weird and you might lose your job and this might get really bad before it gets better, but it will get better.
Because it always does. And that's why I was telling people, I have a 26-year-old that does what I do. And I told him a year ago, I said, dude, don't spend it all. It's going to go bad. I don't know why, because at the time they were talking about student loans and all that.
Right.
And I said, but it always goes bad. I mean, it always comes back up. But boy, you got to get through the low times, so hopefully he saved up some money. Because, when you're 25 making up, 6 figures, you spend it.
Totally. Well, and I think it's also, if you think too about travel, like I know for myself at 46 years old, the way I think about traveling has changed now than when I was 26 when I first started doing this. And, prior to that, I mean, I was a kid who grew up, we didn't ever travel because we didn't have any money.
No, we didn't either.
So like going to the airport, to me, I loved airplanes so much. My mom used to drive me down to the Oakland airport so I could watch the planes take off and land. Because that was entertainment for me, and we didn't get to go on airplanes. I went on a couple of airplanes from the time I was, could remember until, maybe I was a teenager. And like going to college, I went to Stanford to play baseball. Loved being there. It was the place I wanted to be more than anywhere else in the world. Great school, great baseball program. Most of the kids that I played with, and these are guys I'm still really close with, I love like brothers. Most of them came from wealthy families, and they had traveled a lot. So we would go on road trips, just flying, from Stanford down to play UCLA or out to play Arizona State or whatever. We had to wear a coat and tie, which almost all the guys on the team bitched and moaned about. They didn't like that. I only owned one suit, and I was super proud to have that suit. And I wore it proudly. And these guys were like wearing jeans and like, it was this weird, again, and I'm not some sort of holier than thou. I was like, I'm wearing my full suit. I was super proud. We'd go through the airport, and then they paid for our flight and they paid for our hotel. And we would stay at like the Courtyard Marriott in Marina Del Rey or whatever. I thought it was like a 5-star hotel because to me it was.
Yeah.
To most of these guys, they were like turning their nose up going, we got to stay at this dump. And, again, it was like they were used to traveling and vacationing, staying at the Four Seasons or wherever the heck they stayed, right? But for me, I took that mentality. I don't say this again, but it was just more like, I'm going to appreciate this because someone is paying for me to do this. I get to play baseball. They give me meal money. Like all these years later, when I get to go on the road and my client is paying for me and I get to stay in a nice hotel and I get to go speak, I still feel like, even though I'm away from my family and it is a little bit of a drag at times and I get a little tired and it doesn't always work and I got to go through security, I got to do all this stuff. I still have that 7-year-old kid in me that's like, oh my God, I get to go to the airport. I get to get on an airplane. I get to fly and travel.
I'm the same way, man.
Keep that with me. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't go on my first plane until I was 18.
Right. And at the same time, I also think it's important for me and for all of us, if those of us who travel a lot, then to realize like what works for me. How do I take care of myself when I travel? How often do I want to travel? Do I have some choice about it? You know, when I first started speaking, I was doing mostly local stuff. Then I started speaking a little bit more where I'd go on planes and I'd fly somewhere and it was nice. And then it was like, oh, maybe one day I'll get to fly internationally. And then I did a few international trips and that was fun and that was cool. And then after a while, I realized international business travel, for me at least, not so fun, like hard and exhausting and doesn't really work for my, you know, I can do it a couple times a year, but so I just had to start saying no or charging a lot of money, quite frankly, if I was going to have to go to India or go to Europe or go to Asia, because like I'd rather say no and stay home than do that. And again, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I could say no to some of that stuff. But I think for all of us, just like in life, it's like creating some healthy boundaries around what works and what doesn't work for us. You know, I won't travel on my birthday or my daughter's birthdays. I won't travel on certain days when it's, you know, my anniversary or Michelle's birthday or different things. And I've had to turn, you know, and that's hard because like the way that I make money is by saying yes and going to speak. So learning, you know, it's spring break. Sorry, we get one spring break a year. We're going to go take a fun family trip and I'm going to have to say no to some of the things that come in. But those are all things I've had to learn and learn the hard way over the years of having my own business and doing this work.
I think that's, dude, I'm with you. They scheduled a sales meeting for me on my oldest daughter's high school graduation. Oof. I'm like, nope. And they're like, what do you mean?
Sorry.
I'm like, no. Dude, I wouldn't. There's nothing that's going to prevent me from seeing my daughter graduate high school.
Right.
Well, you know, I mean, why can't you come? I'm like, and then thankfully there was enough other people around the country that all had similar things that weekend.
Same thing. Yeah.
So they can't. They rescheduled it, but I'm like, not in a million years. I missed some games, and I have to miss my daughter's birthday for we do it's called NFR. It's National Finals Rodeo. It's in Las Vegas, and it's the first 2 weeks of December every year. I've done it for 11 years now, and my daughter's birthday is in that time frame, and she's come out on a couple of them, but I always make it up for it. One thing I was going to ask you before because I know you got to get going and to get way too much of your time is, what do you do when you're waiting in an airplane? Do you listen to movie? Do you watch movies? Do you listen to music? Are you doing work stuff when you're traveling, like on the planes and airports?
I'm kind of a work nerd when I travel, because and it's mostly email. I can't really write. I can't do much stuff that's creative. But what I can do is just bang out a bunch of email and just not clean out, but manage some of my inbox. So I love getting on planes. My favorite part of international travel, this will tell you what a nerd I am, is how much email I can get done just sitting on a flight to London. And the people who work with me know, oh my God, he's going to get on one of those international flights and like the Wi-Fi is not going to work, and then he's going to land and I'm going to get 78 emails in my inbox all at once. But I work a lot on the plane. I don't watch a lot of movies. If I'm not working, I'm usually sleeping. Like I'm either exhausted and I just need to take a nap, or I'm working, catching up on stuff. Sometimes I can write proposals or follow up on kind of business specific stuff, but I don't usually write or create much of anything while I'm traveling, but I do a ton of email. And so like, as you can imagine right now, my email inbox is kind of out of control and a mess because I haven't been on any trips in a while.
Yeah, exactly.
I was supposed to, like before all this happened, I was going to take 2 international trips back to back and was going to come home. I mean, it's just to underscore the point of what we were just talking about. I was scheduled to speak at an event in Dublin, Ireland for eBay, and was going to fly out to Dublin, do that event, fly home because my younger daughter dances and her dance troupe was scheduled to dance at halftime at the Golden State Warriors game. Was going to go to that game on a Sunday, and then the following Monday morning get on a plane and fly to Paris for an event with our client Nutanix. After landing back from Dublin on like Friday or Saturday, I think Saturday I would have gotten back and then gone to the game Sunday and then flown back out Monday, which my wife was like, "That's insane, babe. You should just stay." And I was like, "I'm not missing Rosie dancing at the Warriors game. I'm sorry." And I said, and the good news is, I'm going to get a ton of email done on those flights to and from. I'm just going to have to manage my time zone, body chemistry, and figure out, sort of stay on European time. But both of those things ended up getting canceled because nobody was traveling. And it was going to be like the last week in March and the first week in April.
And let's be honest, you just wanted to go to the dance thing because you had a chance to meet Steph Curry.
Well, the truth is, Curry was back playing, and the Warriors have been terrible this year. But I was like, hey, Steph's going to be in the building. I want to be there, see Rosie dance, and see Steph hit a few threes.
That's a win-win.
Exactly.
Cool. Hey, so what's the best way for any of my listeners to follow you, to see what you got going on? I mean, you got a fan of me, but how can other people stay in touch with what you got going on?
Yeah, the best way is our website, which is just mike-robbins.com. That's MIKE-ROBBINS.com. And they can find out all about me and my work and my new book. We're all in this together at our website.
Perfect. Well, hey, Mike, I appreciate the time. I'm going to let you get going. I appreciate the extra time. So,
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You got a fan. So I really appreciate the extra time. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Mike.
Cool, man. Thanks. That was fun.
All right, buddy.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.